What are the craziest ways you've heard of people making money? In college, I take a class on how to start and run a small business. Prof tells us to think of ridiculous business models for our fictitious businesses, as we will get more out of the class that way. Stupid ideas ensue. Selling paper clips door to door, refilling car gasoline tanks in people's driveways, service to read and summarize the newspaper to executives, etc. One classmate decides he is going to sell tumbleweed. Guess who quits college and started a successful business? Tumbleweed guy. Takes a van to the desert, collects tumbleweed and sells them to Hollywood movie and TV studios who need them. Keeps the tumbleweed in a warehouse, and since they never spoil, his only costs are gasoline, storage and a website. He eventually becomes the #1 tumbleweed provider to studios around the world, shipping tumbleweed globally. Made a heap of money selling what millions of people drive by and ignore every year. Heard of crazier? But a guy I know, friend of my mother's, went to Texas 30+ years ago. We are from Norway, and he noticed every single garden had a trampoline. And it was almost always Jump King the circular with plume mat ones. So he went to the HQ, bought 10 and took back to Norway. Within days they were sold, and he ordered 50 more, same thing. So he became the only importer and has God knows how many millions to his name today. Importing is a fantastic but niche career. I know someone else who goes to Nepal every year, fills all of her luggage with handmade shawls, scarves, hats, and gloves, and then sells them at farmers markets on the weekends the rest of the year. She's not rich, but she basically works 2 days a week and makes enough money to do whatever she wants the rest of the year. Holy shit, this is crazy, because I worked with a guy who did the same thing, but with these little sailboats he shipped to Finland. From Texas. Some lakes have various rental watercraft, from houseboats to paddle boats, to a little 2-person sailboat. For whatever reason, these things are a hit commodity. He can't buy them fast enough and ship them. He lives here for work. His job transferred him. But he told me he probably only needs to work 5 or so more years until he figures out how to directly ship them there. Back when Dogecoin took off, I wrote a guide on recovering old lost wallets, and it got so popular. I was flooded with requests for further help. Some corrupted wallet files, some lost passwords. etc. I have a background in computer science and experience in data retrieval and password cracking. So I started helping people in exchange for a percentage cut industry standard for wallet recovery. All above board with a contract and everything. For a while I was getting new clients every week and making hundreds up to thousands of dollars on every successful recovery with a fairly good rate of success. The biggest one I ever recovered was a 19-letter long password someone had lost. The work dried up when the price of Doge dropped, but it got me the down payment on a house. A cabbie in Dublin once told me a story about one of his fares who had a brilliant hustle. The guy was a sculptor. He would watch horse races. Then when a horse won, he'd use social media to contact the owner directly with a digital mock-up of a life-size sculpture of the winning horse. Now, the people who own winning racehorses tend to be very rich. We're talking sheikhs, oligarchs, billionaires. Every now and again, one of these owners would buy it and spend 100,000 euros or so on a statue commemorating their animal's win. Dude only did a couple a year and spent the rest of the time living the good life. About 4 years ago, I noticed we started running out of Ziploc bags quickly every week. Turned up my 10-year-old at the time was mixing gummy bears or worms with Hispanic spices and camo sauce, then selling them at school for $5 a bag. She was bringing in about $1,015 a week. She is now about to turn 15, and I helped her build her candy business, and she has her candies in stores in our city and is still expanding. When I worked in a really busy, upscale restaurant, my coworker would put all of his cash-paying customers' bills on his credit card and keep the cash which he used to promptly pay off his credit card. He did this all day, every day for quite a while, and the points started to add up, and he was getting free airfare, etc. Worked great for a while until management noticed a rise in credit card processing fees with an emphasis on one employee, and they shut him down real quick. In Air Force squadrons, it's normal to have a snack bar that the junior members run usually quite poorly. At a base that I was stationed, one of the maintenance squadrons had an airman who was so bad at maintenance that they just put him on permanent snack bar duty. Airman Canton Orange responds surprisingly well to his new task, and the snack bar is suddenly well stocked and organized. Since the snack bar is so well stocked, many of the maintainers just buy their lunch there instead of going to the dining facility on the other side of base. Even the aircrew stop by after a sortie to get a snack since the selection is so good. At the end of the year, he reports a profit of nearly $3,000 to the Squadron Booster Club. They are elated and keep him running the snack bar for the next few years. He quietly runs the snack bar until his enlistment runs out, receives his honorable discharge, and returns to civilian life. Before he departs, he trains a new airman to run the snack bar the same way he does. The new guy keeps it going, and at the end of the year, the new airman reports a profit of approximately $18,000. You guessed it. The first airman had embezzled all of it in untraceable cash, and since he'd cooked the books with absolutely no oversight, they couldn't prove shit. Furthermore, he was out of the military, they no longer had jurisdiction. The squadron leadership realized they would look like complete ass clowns if they reported this, so they did the sensible thing and just kept their fucking mouths shut. This kid didn't do a lick of work his entire enlistment, and left the base for the last time with his GI Bill and a duffel bag with the better part of 50 grand in cash. Keezer sows level shit for a 19-year-old. This dude decided to embezzle money from the US military and only walked with 15k a year. You gotta do better than that. That's like knocking over a bank and only taking a handful of mints from the bowl. I went to college in a capital C college town. A friend of mine bought an old school bus, fixed it up, and took out all the seats. At the end of every semester, she would drive around the neighborhood that was the fancier side of campus living and collect whatever the rich kids were throwing out before they went home for the summer. Flat screen TVs, couches, computers, tables. It was wild to see what people would chuck out and replace the next semester rather than having to deal with getting a storage unit or moving themselves. Sold it all on Craigslist over the summer or the beginning of the next semester and made a killing. I worked in campus security at a small college, and the end of the year was the same for us. A lot of the stuff went into these big dumpsters on the street, and we would find pickers in the dumpsters at 3 o'clock a.m. My shift partner and I would walk through the empty dorms in the middle of the night looking for stuff the kids left behind. He ended up with a tower PC and monitor that worked perfectly. I was a teacher for my full-time job and restocked my classroom with pencils, pens, etc. I think the technology got left behind by international students who were not allowed to export the tech out of the US. A couple kids abandoned cars. There is an English girl who helps wealthy Chinese parents give their kids suitable English names. It is common in East Asia that kids have secondary English names that they use in English class and often also later in life when, for example, traveling for business. People send her photos of her kids, and she suggests a name for, as far as I remember, GBP 50 each. While working on home theater systems in rich people's third or fourth homes, I met a guy who is paid to flush their toilets and drive their car several times a month. He would also open the house for workers like myself and arrange for food or other deliveries when these people came to spend time in the home. Unlike the more wealthy folks who have a designated staff or house manager, this guy serviced multiple clients in the same neighborhood. I'm so glad I don't do residential work any longer. My buddy worked his way through college by panning for gold. This was in 2009 in California. Most days he made nothing. Occasionally he would come home with a couple $100 worth, and I think once he found a night worth over $1,000. My cousin had a metal detector when he was in HS. He would go every weekend down to the lake and take it with him on vacation. He found all kinds of things. He did find gold jewelry and would sell it online. He made so much money he bought his own car. Friend I went to high school with became a millionaire because he figured out this service of just maintaining the tire pressure of car fleets of big companies. He confronted them by random checking on the parking lot the pressure of some cars and provided them a data-driven calculation how much they could save on gas per car per year by just having the tire pressure regulated, having it multiplied to the numbers of cars of the fleet, and took a commission on that difference in exchange for the service of regulating their tire pressure once in a while. All big firms with customers in no time invested only in a van and a compressor, inflating tires all day. Now he owns 2 villas with swimming pool and a boat lol. This feels like the story a retired drug dealer would tell people on how he got his money. I knew a woman whose job was literally to sleep. A local office building owner wanted somebody on site 24/7 to be the point of contact with first responders if they ever needed to be called. So they hired her to come into the building in the evening when the maintenance crew was finishing their work, and she would settle up to sleep for the night in a bedroom they'd set aside for her. In the morning, she'd hand the building back over to the office employees and go on about her day. No first responders were ever called. It's about the least stressful legitimate job I could ever imagine. I forget the exact circumstances. But a few years back, some religious group gathered a lot of momentum and followers saying the world was going to end on a certain date. There were a group of atheists who opened a business that advertised that when the rapture happened and all the Christians went to heaven, they would take care of the raptured people's pets. A bunch of Christians signed contracts and paid non-refundable deposits. Then surprise, no rapture, and the atheists walked away with a good deal of cash. Brilliant in my opinion. Back in the 90s, I knew a guy who put an ad in the classified section of the newspaper which read something along the lines of, "For $10, I'll tell you my secret to making easy money." Send $10 cash to address to find out how. People would send him $10, and he would then instruct them to put a classified ad in the newspaper telling people to send $10 and how to make money. When we were 16, we hung out in Vegas with a homeless guy for a couple days. He survived by having a stack of those cards the casinos give out to track how much you spend. He'd go up the strip and put them in random machines at all of the casinos. Hours later, he'd go back and collect them. He'd get free meals, free rooms, and all sorts of random shit. Doesn't seem like it could work out in the long term, but it was working for him. There's people who live stream themselves sleeping, and creepy as people pay money to watch them sleep. If they pay money, they can make sounds that startle them and wake them up and stuff. I knew a guy who did it and actually made decent money. Creepy AF. I would never do it. Toy was pushed down the stairs by a teen girl who told me to pay attention and get out of her way. I wrecked my dress during the fall and was getting back up when some guy rushed up to me, apologized for his daughter, and handed me $500 as compensation. My dad invested $50,000 in a company that gives people money to become the beneficiaries of their life insurance policies. Basically, it's like when old people want their life insurance before they die. This company gives you like a quarter of your life insurance policy, and when you die, they take the whole amount, so they're only out a quarter, and they get the rest. He got a little plaque with the names of the 3 people whose life insurance he partially owned and got regular updates on their health. It was really fucking morbid, especially since he doesn't get a return on his investment until they die. So here's my dad, hoping 3 old people die, listening to updates on their rapidly declining health, when suddenly, one of them starts getting better at like 92. Then lo and behold, the other 2 start getting better. Hell, they're up and walking around, traveling with their kids, enjoying the money he partially gave them. This was good news to you and I, but my dad was seething, especially because the investment company started calling and asking for more money, stating that they are living longer than expected and we need money to cover their insurance premiums. Not paying a few hundred a month until they die would mean forfeiture of the original investment of $50,000. Well, that was out of the question. They were going into their late 90s. Surely they'll croak soon, right? Fast forward 6 months and my MOM finally says, stop that. He gives up the $50,000 and stops paying. Fast forward 2 more years. He gets a letter saying there's a class action lawsuit. There was never any old dying people with big life insurance policies. The whole thing was made up. The guy made off with about $20 million and took off to Chile or something. Serves my dad fucking right. Fucking gambling on old people to die. FFs. That's the craziest way I've heard of someone making money. Let me introduce you to what is called un viager in France. Basically, you put a down payment on a house or apt owned by an older person and you pay them a rent while they are living in it. If they die young, bingo, you got yourself a nice apartment in Paris for pennies on the dollar. If they die old, then it could end up that you would pay over market price. Famously, Jean Calment, the oldest recorded human being to ever live, died at 120, outlived her Voyager's holder and their kid. I have met several Venezuelans that play RuneScape for 10 hours a day generating gold. They trade that gold to other players for actual real money through PayPal. The Venezuelan bolivar is less than worthless, so an hour of fictional video game money is worth more USD to that game's community than most entry-level jobs in Venezuela. I forget the actual exchange rate, but I know it's enough to get by. And it's constant. Tons of American or European or Japanese players will just PayPal you 5 USD for 7 hours of actual gold gathering for them. 5 USD is nothing for most people, but in Venezuelan markets that's bread, milk, rice and even a little meat for at least a day. I have a friend who sells pictures of her feet. In heels, barefoot squishing cake. In mud, she charges extra for special requests. Has strict no-go rules. Never shows anything above the calf, so she can't be identified, no tats. All proceeds go to her kid's college fund. Has made enough to fund a PhD. This one isn't necessarily crazy, but is legitimately infuriating and pisses me off that it's legal. I know a family that started a company signing up the elderly to Medicare plans. They did so well all their children quit their careers, and did it too, including a successful lawyer and finance guy. My problem is these people prey on the elderly. As someone with parents and in-laws, I've personally seen the damage these companies do by signing up PI dementia patients that, while still competent enough to live at home alone, are obviously not completely coherent in conversations or capable of understanding the impact of these decisions. These companies don't give a damn. Sign them up and make their commission. Family members then have to spend countless hours cleaning up the mess. I'm against the death penalty, but there are times, based on what I've gone through personally and heard stories of, that I wouldn't mind seeing those taking advantage of the elderly face immediate execution. Back in 2005, I had this night job working for Bank of America. After a year or so, I decided to go back away to school, was 20 at the time, and asked if I could have a leave of absence and only work during winter or summer breaks. They'd never done it before for anyone, but agreed because I had been the department's top performer for several months running. So I left, and when I came back a few months later for Christmas break, I worked a couple weeks through the new year. At first, I didn't notice I'd been overpaid because I was accustomed to the YTD figure being somewhat large. But then, I realized that there'd only been a week or two of 2007 at that point. They paid me the entire time I was away at school. My one-week check had 650 hours of overtime on it. Making 13 HR, I grossed $8,500 for those 2 weeks. Where all mistakes were surprisingly common. So I told my boss the next night at work. She said they'd come for the overage the next payday. I reminded her that it was my last week before heading back to school, and there wouldn't be a next one. They always find you, was all she said. So school year ends that May, and I can't work nights anymore. Just can't take it anymore, and quit over the phone by voicemail. Couple weeks later, I get a letter from the payroll company Fidelity asking if they could please have their $4,700 back. It should be noted I waited months to spend any of that money, and then it was a little for an emergency. A little more I knew I was good for if they tracked me down, and eventually, I essentially didn't need to work for the 2 semesters away. So obviously, I ignored their letter, and then ignored the next one. Then they stopped asking. I never had any legal action taken against me. Nothing on my credit score. And so that was the time I accidentally defrauded the second largest bank in the country. I met a guy in LA at a backpacking hostel about 20 years ago, and he was a fellow Australian. So we got to talking. He had a degree in nuclear physics. There's not a lot of jobs for nuclear physicists in Australia. There's a thing here where you can basically fold a gum leaf and use it as a whistle. I don't know how to do this myself. He'd figured out how to make a synthetic one with basic craft supplies you can get most places, and making them was extremely cheap. So he'd make a few hundred at a time and wander around tourist spots whistling on one, playing up the fair dinkum Aussie roll, and sell them to tourists for $1 or $2. They cost a few cents each to make. He'd been traveling the world for 7 years doing this. Not super crazy, but funny. Guy I work with used to live in the same apartment block as a crack dealer. He knew the guy was on okay terms with him. When my CEO worker would get home from work, he would shine a spotlight at the crackhead's window for a few seconds before going inside to his apartment. The crackhead would then come knocking on his door in a panic, saying that a helicopter was after him, and he would pay my CEO worker $200 to hold his stash for the night. There was the time my son, 10 at the time, wanted to sell lemonade. Problem was, we did not have enough, but he insisted. So off he went, door to door with 3 solo cups and a jug of lemonade. He returned in 30 minutes with half a jug of lemonade, 2 solo cups and $45. All the time we sent him into the small arcade section of a restaurant with $5. He came back with 2 game credit cards with around $15 in game credits, $20, and a fistful of tickets. There are other stories too. The kid has luck. He will be one of those people who stumbles through life, yet somehow has more money than the average person. My brother was like that. We used to joke that every time he stuck his finger in a payphone coin return, there would be a quarter in it. I'm dating myself, obviously. He's kept it up. He went into an interesting, but at the time obscure, and not very practical career that has blown up a lot in the last 10 years and is constantly fending off recruiters now. Not really crazy, but I have heard some people abuse the unstable crypto market. I sell automatically to sites or services that haven't updated their rates, or buy cheap crypto to resell. Heard one guy does this 16 hours a day and can make from 10 to a few $100 a day. But I would rather have a normal job instead of doing that. My friend got an agricultural job in Quebec during the 1990s. The job? He ran naked through fields of marijuana plants, covering himself in plant residue. This residue was then scraped off of his naked body and turned into hash. The 90s truly were a magical time. Which one of these stories do you think is the most bizarre way someone has made money? Are you tempted to try any of these for yourself? Do you have any similar shocking stories of people making money? If you enjoyed, please like the video. And if you liked it enough to be tempted to stick around, please subscribe to be notified of my future uploads. See you in the next one.